So, uh, so in the last class, we were looking at optimization, and we basically, if we have to look at the entire journey of how to optimize things, then the first step is to pick out your critical points, right? So, so suppose there's some function f defined on a set A to R. Okay, so A is the domain, R is definitely the codomain. All right, so the first step is to find the boundary points. Boundary points of A. All right, so we find the boundary points of the domain of the function, that is set A. Second step is to find the critical points. Critical points of the function f. Okay, so we are finding boundary points for the domain and critical points of the function. All right, so when we are looking at boundary points, f does not play any role. All right, so that's interesting. That's interesting because you see, if you have a function g defined on A to R, even though g is different, the boundary points of g of this particular thing is going to be same because the domain is same. All right, but the critical points are going to be different. Critical points have two. First of all, where f prime does not exist, derivative does not exist, and B is where f prime is equal to 0. All right, so mostly what happens is they will give us a function f defined on R to R. So first of all, the domain is R, so there is no boundary point. Then they say that the function f is twice differentiable, let's say. Twice differentiable automatically implies that it is differentiable, which implies that f prime does not exist, doesn't happen ever. So the only possibility for an optima can be f prime is equals to 0. So when you have a function in which these conditions are given, that you have your domain as R and the function is twice differentiable or even differentiable for that matter, then we don't need to look at these two things. We only need to focus on f prime does not, f prime equals to 0. So we find f prime equals to 0 and that will give us the optimas. Now in optimas, once we have located all these points, okay, so these are going to be the points at which there could be an optima. So after this, let's say we are only focusing on f prime equals to 0. Okay, so boundary points and does not exist points. So for them, you will have to basically check if they are a maxima or minima. Can anybody tell me how do you check if a boundary point is a local maxima? Question is, let the set A be equal to A to B closed. So when is f of A, when is A basically a local maxima, let's say? When is A a local maximum?
So when the function starts decreasing after this point?
Very good. So the answer for this is when limit x tending to A plus f prime of A or f prime of x, sorry, f prime of x is basically negative. So the function has to be reducing to the right of A. So then it is a local maximum. All right, so similar things will hold for A being local minima. So it will be minima when f prime is positive And if you are talking about B, then the limit will be x tending to B minus. All right, limit x tending to B minus. So you can get a question like this. So when you get a question like this, it's always better to imagine a function. So let's say a function is defined on the set A to B. And when is it a maxima? It will be a maxima when this function is reducing around A, to the right of A. Okay, so that's why we say this condition holds. F prime to the right of A is negative. So the function must be reducing to the right of A. Okay. So you can draw a graph and derive all the conditions for A being local maxima, A being local minima, B being a maxima, and B being a minima. Okay. So I'm not going to give all those conditions for you to you. You can just draw a graph in the exam and you can figure it out, right? It's not that difficult. Let's come to the critical point. So suppose you have f prime not existing at a particular point. Okay, so the function is continuous at some point C. There is some point C which belongs to A to B such that f prime at C does not exist. But the function is continuous, but function f is continuous. Okay, so then the question is, what is the condition for f to have a local minima at C? Draw a graph of a function which has a local minima at some point C, but it is not differentiable at that point. That is, it is not smooth at that point. You can basically consider mod x at x equals to 0. Right? Because mod x at x equals to 0 looks like this. So at this point, you have f prime does not exist. Right? So how does this become? What would be the conditions for this to be a local minima? I know this is a local minima, but you can get some other question like this. So when would that be a local minima? So obviously f prime here is positive. So f prime at C plus should be positive and f prime at C minus should be negative. So when that is true, that f prime C minus is negative and f prime C plus is positive, then you have this thing as a local minimum. Uh, so yeah, so these are things which you can basically derive from graphs. So you have to you may not be able to remember each and every condition, but you can in an exam draw a graph which is representative of such a function which has the desired properties, and you can derive from there what you need. Now coming to stationary points, that is f prime equals to 0. How do I check when it's going to be a maxima or a minima? Okay, so suppose at point C belonging to A to B, you have f prime at C is equals to 0. Okay. So when f double prime of C is negative, what does that imply? When f double prime C is negative, what does that imply? C is a local what?
Local maxima.
Maxima. Very good. Okay, so this is a concave function, so it will look like this, right? So this is basically concave. So C would be a local maxima. All right. Similarly, when you have f double prime C positive, you would have C as a local minima. Okay, because then it would be a convex function like this, and C would be a local minima. What about f double prime c equals to 0? Then what happens?
The point of inflection.
Okay, so this is exactly what we were discussing last time, that f double prime c equals to 0 does not directly imply point of inflection. In this regard, I discussed two examples, x cube and x to power 4 at x equals to 0. So for both these functions, x equals to 0 is a point where f double prime is going to be 0. Because if you look at double derivative, this thing is going to be double derivative of 6x, which is 0. And this is going to be 12x square, which is again 0. But what I get is that this is indeed a point of inflection, whereas this is a minimum. Okay. Because if I were to draw the graphs, the graph of x cube looks like this, whereas the graph of x to power 4 looks like this, a U-shaped graph. All right, so it's not that you are wrong, but it's not necessarily always true that f double prime equals to 0 is inflection. So this is going to be a inflection if f double prime c plus into f double prime c minus is negative. Basically, my f double prime should be of different signs on the two sides of point C. Okay. It is going to be a minima if f double prime C plus. So you can see here f double prime. So this is a minima. So it's a minima if f double prime C plus. As you can see, f double prime C's formula is 12x square. So this is also positive, and f double prime C minus is also positive. And it is going to be a maxima if f double prime c plus is also negative and f double prime c minus is also negative. So you can really construct a matrix here. Okay, you can actually construct a matrix to derive this, but I don't want you guys to remember it like that. But if it helps you, then why not? If you can remember it, then sure. Okay, so you can write f double prime c plus positive, f double prime c plus negative, f f double prime c minus positive, and f double prime c minus negative. So when they are both positive, you get a minima. When they are both negative, you get a maxima. And when they are of opposite signs, you get an inflection point. Okay. So if you can if you can remember it, great. If you can't, just you can think of x cube and x to power 4. If you remember examples, it is easier to reproduce it in exams. So that's why I like to give examples, because then you can remember. If I just give you all these rules, then it will become very challenging to remember them. So it's better to remember these examples. All right. So yeah. So then we talked about asymptotes. So asymptotes are basically, I gave you this document about asymptotes as well. Right. So asymptotes are basically some line which the function is tending to at infinity. So as either x or f of x goes to infinity, the function becomes that line. So there are vertical asymptotes, there are horizontal asymptotes, and there are slant asymptotes as well. So Asymptote, strictly speaking, is not in our syllabus, but sometimes it becomes interesting to know them. So if you go through it, maybe you'll come across something which is interesting. I'll, as I said, if you go through it and you have any doubts, I'll be happy to handle it. Otherwise, I don't think it's worth that much time. But yeah, you need to know it. If you've not read about it, then you definitely need to know it. So we have L orbital. So let us move to one of the problems from the problem set from curve sketching. So this is going to be one of the homeworks for you this time. Okay. So consider the function 3x to power 4 minus 8x cubed plus 10. So I have to plot the graph of this function 3x to power 4 minus 8x cubed plus 10. Yeah. 3x to power 4 minus 8x cubed plus 10. So this is my f of x. So I have to draw the graph of this function. So how this problem set approaches this question is that it has broken down the entire process of finding the curve of any function into these parts. So first it says when is the graph increasing and when is it decreasing. Okay. So the first part is when is this graph increasing. So for that I need to find f prime x positive. So what is f prime of x for this function? Yeah, Yuvakshi, what is f prime x for this function?
Sir, 12x cube minus 24x square.
Okay. So I can take x square common here and I can write it as 12x. I can actually take 12x square common here and this becomes x minus 1. No, x minus 2. Right? So this part is always positive. So the entire f prime is positive if x minus 2 is positive. Okay. So x minus 2 is positive if, so this is basically x is greater than 2. So how you approach this problem set is you draw a line and you start marking these points. So x equals to 2 is a critical point. So this is your 2 point. So here you would have f prime positive and here you would have f prime negative. Right? So next, move to the next part. Where is the graph concave upward and where is it concave downward? So concave upward is basically concave and concave downward is basically convex. So this is some old language, which it's not very prevalent, but it's an old problem set that I've copied from somewhere. So I'm not going to take credit for it, but I'm just going to say that it's concave upward means that it is U-shaped. That is basically concave and concave downward is basically convex. Okay. So for that, I need f double prime. So Vinay, what's the f double prime of this function?
So 36x square minus 48x.
So I can take x common and then I can write it as, or I can take actually 12x common and I can write this as 3x minus 4. Okay. So there are going to be 2 points. One, when is f double prime 0? So it's 0 when x is 0 and it is 0 when x is equals to 4 by 3. So you can plot these points here. this is going to be your 0, and this is going to be your 4/3. So when x is greater than both these values, both these terms are positive, which means in this region you would have f double prime positive. And when x is below these values, it is below 0 and it is below 4/3, that is in this region, then both these values are negative, so f double prime is again going to be positive. Right? So these are some shortcuts of dealing with such problems. And in the intermediate zone, one of them is positive, the other is negative, so f double prime is going to be negative. So f double prime negative is basically your concave. Oh no, concave upward is convex. Wait, I get confused. Let me just quickly check. Concave upward is convex. Concave upward. Yeah, sorry. Concave upward is convex. Yeah, U-shaped curve, so it is concave upward. So that's your concave, convex thing. So this region is your, so basically whenever you have f double prime positive, they call it concave upward. This is f double prime negative is concave downwards, and again you have concave upwards. Right? So your important points till now are 0, 4/3, and 2. So these are your important points. Now, third is, where are the local minima and local maxima? Establish conclusively that they are local minima or maxima. So obviously this function is defined on R2R. So there are no boundary points. F double prime always exists. So f double prime does not, sorry, f it's twice differentiable again. So f prime does not exist, will not happen ever. So the only possibility for an optima is going to be f prime 0. Okay, so Kritika, from this particular thing, where is f prime going to be 0?
When x is equal to 0 or x is equal to 2.
Very good. So x equals to 0 and x equals to 2. So these are going to be your critical points. So I have to look for an optima somewhere here. Okay. All right. So let me neatly write down all the summary that we have till now on one new line. So the points that I have in question are 0, 4/3, and 2, wherein 0 and 2 are my f prime 0 points. Regarding my f double prime, okay, regarding my f prime, you have f prime positive here and you have f prime negative here. And regarding f double prime, you have f double prime positive, you have f double prime positive, and you have f double prime negative here. Okay, so now let's focus on 0 first. So what is 0? Is it a maxima, is it a minima, or is it an inflection point? Do you guys want this, or I'm guessing you guys are sitting with a notebook, so I'm not going to bother scrolling up and down again and again. So just note down the function 3x to power 4 minus 8x cubed plus 10. That's sufficient. So what is 0? Is 0 a maxima, a minima, or a point of inflection?
It's the point of inflection.
Very good. It's a point of inflection. So it becomes actually clear from here. F double prime is changing its direction around 0. So you don't actually need to look at anything else. So it's going to change its direction around 0. And f prime is always negative here. So it's going to be convex downward, and then it's going to be concave downwards, right? So the curve probably looks like this, something, okay, something like this. Okay. Then what about 2? What can you tell about point 2? Is it going to be a maxima or a minima?
So maxima.
Maxima.
Okay, what is f prime at 2? Kanishka, what is f prime of 2?
So -6.
No, it is 0. That's how we found f prime, right? And that's how we found that this is a critical point. We solved f prime x equals to 0, and we said 2 and 0 are the points where f prime is 0. So it's a stationary point. So f prime at 2 is 0. Right? And what is f double prime at 2? Kanishka again. What is f double prime at 2? Is it, I don't want the value. I just want, is it positive or negative? The answer is actually written here, already written here. Don't need to solve it.
So it's positive.
It's positive, yeah, because this entire zone is positive. This entire zone is positive, and this entire zone is negative. So f double prime 2 is positive, f prime 2 is 0. So what is 2? Is it a maxima or a minima again? Come on, guys, what is 2? Nobody can
So
answer this.
minima.
Yeah, it's a minima. I just said the rules at the start of the class. I mean, you won't get it in a more lucid manner anywhere else. Okay. So f prime 2 is 0, f double prime 2 is positive. So this is basically a minimum. And this is an inflection point. Okay. So after this, all I need is to go by these rules. I know that there is some point of inflection happening here. It's here in this zone, it is f prime negative and f double prime positive. So here you have a concave reducing curve. Here you have a convex.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
So you have interchanged the signs of the f prime. F prime before 2 is negative and
Oh, yeah,
after 2 is
sure.
positive.
Sorry. Sorry. Yeah. So it's still, I mean, I remembered it from earlier that it is concave reducing. This is convex reducing. Okay. This is again concave reducing. Okay. And here you have your concavity continues. Concave.
shouldn't
No,
it
no,
be
no, no. Sorry.
convex? Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
I just realized. This is convex reducing, this is concave reducing, this is convex reducing, and this is convex increasing. So after this, you can easily draw the curve. Again, I'm going to spend one more line here to note down everything, and then I'm going to plot it. Okay. 4/3, 2, and the curve. So it helps to generally find out what is the functional value at 2. So that's your minima, right? So what is going to be the functional value at 2? So f at 2 is 3 into 2 to power 4 minus 8 into 2 cube plus 10. So that's 2 to power 4 is 16. So 48 minus 2 cube is 2 cube is 8. 8 8 so 64 plus 10. So this is going to be 48 plus 10, 58 minus 64 is minus 6. So it's just negative 6 here. So it's going to be here, and otherwise it's reducing. It's coming from infinity. First, it's going to be convex till 0, then concave, then again convex, reaches a minima at 2, and then again starts rising like this. So this is the shape of the. Now, when you look at this document on curve sketching, in the end, there are these solutions. No, not in the end. In a separate document, I've added a separate document. So these are the solutions for curve sketching. So in the initial questions, you will get detailed sort of things. Later on, you'll get short solutions. Obviously, you'll get more adept as you do these problems. So it's going to look like this. Okay. All right, so this is how you're going to roughly do it. Let me take one more example. You don't need to do all of them. It's sufficient to do,
So,
let's say, the first 15 is sufficient. Yeah.
so can you please show the graph once?
You mean the actual solution or my solution?
The one which you have drawn.
This. Okay. This is the solution.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
This one also has the solutions. Okay, so at 0 you have the first inflection, then at 4/3 you again have an inflection somewhere here, and then it keeps on going up, convexing. Okay. So let's look at one more problem which will give you some. Okay, so sometimes they ask random things. Indicate the coordinates of all points where the graph of f has horizontal tangents. So this is, what is horizontal tangent? Horizontal tangent is when the tangent has 0 slope. So this is basically f prime 0. So it's just asking where does f prime become 0? So that's all it's asking. Okay. Concave up, absolute maximum. Okay, absolute maximum and absolute minimum, these are your global maximum and global minimum. So if you get multiple local minima, then you have to substitute the values and check which of these minimas is the lowest. So that will give you the absolute minimum, and similarly absolute maximum. Okay, so let's do question number 3, that is asking all asymptotes. So let's do question number 3, x square minus 1 by x. So find the domain. So simple one. So let me put this to you, Akshi. What is the domain of this function, Akshi? We have done domain problems, so this is fairly straightforward.
So,
Yeah,
so all real numbers except 0.
very good. R minus 0. So that is the domain. Okay. X intercepts. So X intercept is where Y becomes 0. Very important point. Okay. It's not X equals to 0. X equals to 0 is your Y intercept. That's X equals to 0 anyway, not in the domain. So he's asking you for X intercept. So where does it hit the X axis? Where does Y become 0? So that's going to be when x square minus 1 is 0. Right? So x square minus 1, 0. Yeah, so x square minus 1 equals to 0 implies x equals to plus minus 1. So these are your x intercepts. So at x equals to plus 1 and at x equals to minus 1, the graph is going to pass through the x-axis. Okay, so these are the 2 points that I noted now. And I know that 0 is not in the domain. So that's all I know after part A of this problem. Okay, now the third part is find all, B part is find all asymptotes. So to find all asymptotes, okay, so first I'll find vertical asymptotes. So vertical asymptotes is when f of x tends to infinity or negative infinity. So that obviously happens when x is tending to 0. Okay, so what is limit x tending to 0 minus f of x? What happens when x goes to negative 0, 0 minus? Something close to 0, but to the left of 0. The question is, obviously, it's going to infinity. My question is it going to positive infinity or is it going to negative infinity? That's my question. What is limit x tending to 0 minus f of x?
The minus infinity.
No, you put 0 here, so you get minus 1 upon x, limit x tending to 0 minus. So this is minus 1 and x has a negative inbuilt, so this will be positive. So it will go to positive infinity here. So the curve basically looks like this because it's going to positive infinity. The curve will look like this to the left of 0. Okay. Similarly, limit x tending to 0 minus 0 plus f of x will be equal to minus 1 by x, but now x is positive, so that will be negative infinity. So this will be equal to negative infinity, minus 1, negative infinity. So the curve is going to look like this. Okay, so that's all I know. I don't know if it directly goes here or if it goes like this. So I am not going to stretch it to this point. I know that the curve passes through this point, but I'm not going to take it there right now. I just know that it looks like this. Additional information is needed right now. So that will come through the remaining parts of the problem. Determine all intervals in which the function is increasing or decreasing. All asymptotes may also horizontal asymptotes. Horizontal asymptotes is when x tends to positive infinity. So what is limit x tending to positive infinity f of x? What happens when x goes to positive infinity? What does this thing become?
So that is infinity on
Very
positive
good.
infinity.
Positive infinity. Very good. So I know that at infinity, this thing is becoming infinity. In fact, it's actually becoming x square. So if I divide this, it becomes x. So it will be equal to the line y equals to x. So if I just plot the line y equals to x here, at infinity, this is going to go along the line. I don't know right now if it's going to go above this line or below this line. I don't know, but I know that it's going to go along this line. Okay, so that will become clear in a bit. But I know that it's going to go to positive infinity. That is sufficient mostly. That is sufficient mostly. But yeah, if you get it equal to x, it's going to go along this line. Had this function been 2x square minus 1 by x, then this would have been 2x. Right? And then it would basically be going to infinity again, but it will be going along this curve. Okay, so it will basically be a, like, after some point, it will graze along this y equals to 2x line. So that is your not horizontal asymptote, that is basically your slant asymptote. Okay, that is slant asymptote. And similarly, so this is basically positive infinity, and limit x tending to negative infinity f of x is going to be, so again, x square minus 1 upon x. So this just becomes x. It is still x, but now it's going to be negative infinity. So this is going to be negative infinity. Okay. Okay, let's do the next bit. Determine the intervals on which the function is increasing or decreasing. So now it gets interesting. So f prime. So Vinay, what is the f prime of this function? X square minus 1 by x.
So 1 minus x power minus 2.
Wait, can you repeat?
1 minus 1 by x square.
1 minus 1 by x square. Okay, so it's basically you're saying x square minus 1 upon x square. Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Sir, it's 1 plus 1 by x square.
Yes, so 1 plus.
Okay, so now you put me in a dilemma. Now I'll have to do it. So f prime is equals to, I'm going to differentiate the numerator 2x times x minus, then differentiate the denominator 1 times x square minus 1 whole divided by x square, because denominator square. So this becomes 2x square minus x square plus 1 upon x square. So that is x square plus 1 by x square. But I'm happy that all of you had done it before I asked you. So that's good. So I'm happy for that. So f prime is x square plus 1 by x square. Right? So this is my f prime. Okay. And it's basically always positive. It's always increasing. It keeps on increasing. It's going to reduce nowhere. So now the graph has only one option, right? It has only one option. To pass through these points, it will have to go like this because it has to be increasing. It cannot be like this. It cannot be like this, right? So that's one possibility, but that possibility involves this function to reduce and then increase. So that's not going to happen. So it has to keep reducing and reach here. So basically what will happen is this graph will, let me remove these points. These points are bad. So these graphs are going to look like this actually. Okay, so we can further find the local maximum minimum if they exist. There are no local maxima or minima because f prime is always positive. It keeps on increasing everywhere. So no point is local maxima minima. The only point which could have been something is 0, but 0 is not even in the domain. So we are not going to say 0 is anything. Okay, 0 is nothing. 0 is not in the domain. Determine the intervals on which the function is concave upward or downward. Find the inflection points if they exist. So for that, I'm going to do f double prime. So Yuvakshi, what is f double prime?
Sir, it's minus 2 by x cube.
Minus 2 by x cube.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So minus 2 by x cube is basically going to be negative for, please everybody else check it. I'm not checking it. Okay. So I want all all the others to check?
Yes, sir, I'm giving the same.
Okay.
Yes, sir, minus 12x cube.
All right, great. So by democracy, we have a unanimous vote for this function. So we'll go ahead with it. So negative for x positive, and it's positive for x negative, which means that for x positive, this function is going to be concave, and here it's going to be convex. Okay, and that's how we have drawn it. This is concave, right? This is concave. And this bit is convex. That's how we have done it. Convex to the left. To the left, it is convex. To the right, it is concave. And that's what we have drawn. Okay, so these steps are going to help you draw the graphs. You are going to face issues in the first few problems. But eventually, you'll get the hang of it. And the aim is that when you get a curve like this, maybe you be able to draw its graph in the exam in minimum time. Okay, it should not take you like 10 minutes to draw the graph. So we need speed, and that's why I've given you 15 odd problems. There are more problems. If you feel like doing them, do more problems. There are, I guess, 25 odd problems here. So you can proceed, but ignore functions which have trigonometry in them. So you can do all these things. These latter problems will become interesting 7th onwards. Okay, so these problems will become interesting. Yeah, I don't think till 15th we have anything in trigonometry. 16th is also non-trigonometric. 17th is also non-trigonometric. 18th is also fine. 19th is also fine. This is going to take time, right? So further onwards, they have actually given you the f prime and f double prime to basically reduce your calculation time so that you can focus on the optimizing part and not on the differentiating part. Fine. All right. So it's going to be interesting. 25, 26. Yeah, there are 26 odd problems. If you do find the questions interesting, I find them interesting. But if you also find them interesting, then definitely you can go ahead and do all of them. The solutions are also uploaded, so you can go through the solutions and then we can discuss them in probably next week. Okay, so we can discuss them next week, maybe Thursday. Thursday feels like a good time. So we'll discuss these problems on Thursday. By the way, have you guys attempted the test? Do we have any doubts from the test?
So I think that one question has a wrong answer.
Okay, so
Yes, I guess that was question number 6.
okay, so let me
5
open
or
that
6,
up.
that was.
Okay. All right, so let me open that up. That discussion. Test derivatives. Okay. Is the test. Okay, which problem number? 5th or 6th?
Question number 5.
This one?
I guess so.
Y prime is so log. So this just becomes log yeah, ln of e to power x into ln x will become log e to power x plus log of log x. Yeah, so there's a typo here. So this should have been e to power x into x, right? So then it would have been correct. Yeah, so there's a typo here. For log e to power x into log x. So if you have y equals to log e to power x into log x, so this can be written as log e to power x plus log of log x. So this is basically x plus log of log x. So when I differentiate this, y prime is going to be 1 plus. Now differentiation of log x is, first I differentiate this, so 1 by ln x, and I differentiate log x, so that becomes 1 by x. So 1 plus 1 by x ln x. So that should have been the correct answer.
Yes, so that was what I was getting.
All right, fine. Yeah, so there's a typo here. This log x should not have been. This should have been just e to power x into x. Fine. So I will provide trace marks. All right, so trace marks questions. Okay, so let's continue. Yeah. Yeah, cool. So next thing to do is mean value theorem. So the mean value theorem is a key result that connects the global behavior of a function f. So this is a very important theorem, by the way, mean value theorem, described by the difference f of b minus f of a to its local behavior described by f prime. Okay. So we begin by proving a special case, that is the Rollet theorem. So this is your Rollet theorem. So Rollet theorem says that suppose there's a function defined on a to b to r, it's continuous on the bounded interval a to b, differentiable on open interval a to b, and f of a is equals to f of b. So I have a situation where the function on a to b, suppose this is a and this is b, then the function could basically look like this, or it could look like this, or it could even be horizontal. I don't care for all. Or it could be a very oscillating type of function. The point is that at a and b, the functional values need to be same. Then I don't, this is the only condition that Rollet is saying that needs to satisfy. Okay, that f of a must be equal to f of b. Then what it says is, then there exists a point between a and b such that the function is stationary at that point. So I should not have deleted this thing. Let me bring it back. Yeah. So as you can see in the blue curve, at this point you have f prime 0. In the red curve, at these 2 points you have f prime 0. In the green curve, you have these points where f prime is 0. A lot of points actually. It's differentiable, all right? So I have drawn it pointed, but it should not be pointed. It should be differentiable. And in the black curve, every point is f prime 0. This is a constant function, basically. This is constant function. So every point is going to satisfy your Rollet result. Right. So the proof, important. So by Weierstrass's theorem, okay, you know that f attains its global maximum and minimum values on A to B. So what is Weierstrass's theorem? So Weierstrass's theorem says that a continuous function on a compact set has a maxima and a minima. So that's Weierstrass's theorem. I've talked about it. I've not proved Weierstrass's theorem. The proof of Weierstrass's theorem is not important. You can directly quote Weierstrass's theorem in exam. So Rollet theorem has been asked for proof in ISI exam previously. So when I star mark things, you are supposed to know the proof. All right. So it goes simply like that. So I give you download rights for a reason for these things, so that you can download these notes. And when you download and file them, make sure you put a star mark to the proofs that I am giving you star marks in. So that you know that, okay, these proofs need to be revised before exam. So now you know that there exists a maxima and a minima. Now, if these are both attained at the endpoints, then f is constant. So you're saying that if the maxima or minima are both A and B themselves are both maxima or minima, what it means is that the only possibility for the function is this black line. That is the only situation in which A and B are both maxima and minima. Okay. If something else is happening, okay, so if A and B are both maxima or minima, then you have f prime z everywhere. F prime z equals to 0, f prime c equals to 0 everywhere, and the thing is trivially true. All right. Otherwise, f attains at least one of its global maximum or minimum values at an interior point. So if this is not true, if A and B are not both maxima or minima, but then something inside has to be a maxima or minima. Either you could have a maxima like this, or you could have a minima like this. Now, if you have an interior point as a maxima or minima where the function is differentiable, then the only possibility is f prime must be equals to 0. All right. So that's what we are saying. So remember, there are three situations in which you can have an optima. One is boundary point. Second is f prime does not exist. And third is f prime equals to 0. By saying that the function is differentiable, I have rejected the possibility of f prime does not existing. Now, if only boundary points are all the optimas, then both A and B should be both maxima and minima. Both maxima and minima. This is true because I have already established that f of A should be equal to f of B. Right? So A and B are both maxima and minima. So then what it implies is that f prime c should be equal to 0 for all A less than B less than A less than C less than B. So for all C values between A and B, f prime c is 0. So this is trivially true. And if A and B are not both maxima and minima simultaneously, then there exists C belonging to A to B, which is a maxima or minima. So the only possibility is that at this point C, your f prime must be equals to 0. Okay. You do not need to be rigorously correct with your proofs. All right. So you don't need to by heart it. All right. So you can write it like this. So an optima can exist if these three conditions hold. 1, it's boundary point. 2, f prime does not exist. 3, f prime equals to 0. And then you can write in words what you imply. Be crisp about what you're writing. Don't write essays. ठीक है, पूरी script नहीं लिखनी है हमको. If you're to the point, if you're mentioning everything in half a page, you'll get full marks. Don't worry about it. Okay. You don't need to put all sorts of mathematical symbols there just to get more points. That's not required. Even if you don't quote Weierstrass's theorem, you can just say that F has a maxima or minima. If both of them, you don't need to quote Weierstrass's, because at your level, you're not supposed to know Weierstrass's theorem. And that's why I've not included it in the syllabus, because Weierstrass's theorem has a more difficult proof as compared to mean value theorem. All right. Okay. Now that we have the Rollet theorem, we are going to use Rollet theorem to prove the mean value theorem. So first of all, what is the mean value theorem? Mean value theorem says that if a function is defined on a to b to r, is continuous on a to closed a to b and differentiable on open a to b. So these conditions are same as Rollet, except that mean value theorem does not need f of a to be equal to f of b. So f of a can be different from f of b. So this is one condition which is not required in mean value theorem. So then there exists an intermediate point such that the slope at that intermediate point is basically f of b minus f of a upon b minus a. So what this means is, suppose you have some a to b and your function looks like this, let's say. Now, if I connect these 2 points a and b, I have a line segment with some slope m. So what mean value theorem says is that there will exist some point C here where the slope will be equal to m. There will exist some point C here where f prime of C will be equal to m. All right. So that's all it's saying, that at least at some point your slope should be equal to this thing. So you can choose different ways to go from a to b, a comma f of a. Suppose this is f of a here and this is f of b here. So you can choose different ways to go from f of a comma f of a to f of b. You can choose to go like this. Even then you will have a slope equal to this much here. Or you could choose to go like this, in which case you will have multiple points where slope is equal to this. Okay. So read this. I'll just be back. There's somebody at the door. Okay. So one application. Okay, I'll come to application later. Let us do the proof. So the proof comes from Rollet theorem. So how does the proof work? So in the proof, we say define a new function. Okay, so this proof again is important. Rollet mean value theorem. Totally important. If they just ask you proof for Rollet theorem, you just need to do the first part. If they ask you the proof for mean value theorem, you need to first prove Rollet theorem and then use it to prove the mean value theorem. Okay. And it has been asked in the past, and there's a good likelihood that they can ask you again, because there are hardly like 10 or 15 proofs which I'm going to star mark. So make sure that you revise them. They are not going to be 100 proofs that you have to remember. So just make sure, like triangular inequality is an important proof. This one's an important proof. So there are going to be a few proofs which are going to be important. So make sure that you don't be lazy with them. All right, so you define a new function g of x, which is f of x minus f of a into f of b minus f of a upon b minus a into x minus a. So this is a complicated function, but why am I defining this function? So what happens in this function now is that g of a becomes f of a minus f of a, so that is 0, minus f of b minus f of a upon b minus a into a minus a, so that is 0. So g of a becomes 0. Okay, and g of b, f of b minus f of a upon f of b minus f of a, this is the first part, minus f of b minus f of a upon b minus a into b minus a, right? Because x is now b, so b minus a. So this cancels out. So these cancel out, you get 0. So what you get is that g of a and g of b are 0. So this is the one condition which was lacking in function f, but this condition now is applicable in g. So g will obey Rolle's theorem. So if g obeys Rolle's theorem, it means that there exists a point C such that g prime of C must be 0, right? Because Rolle theorem says that at an intermediate value, the function should have a slope 0. So if you're starting from the same point and ending at the same point, your function should have a 0 slope somewhere in between. So now you have g prime z equals to 0. And what is g prime of x? G prime x, if you differentiate this function, you just get f prime x minus f of b minus f of a upon b minus a. Okay. So this is your m, which is basically f of b minus f of a upon b minus a. So this is your Rolle theorem. This is basically g prime obeys Rolle theorem, so it will be equal to 0 at some c. So f prime of c becomes equals to this value, and that's what you wanted to prove. What you're actually doing in this thing is, what you're actually doing by constructing this function g is that you're rotating the entire axis. All right, so in the original axis, your function can start from some point and end at some other point. But if you were to rotate the axis, okay, so this is your function, let's say. It is starting at this point and ending at this point, right? But if I were to change my axes into these values, suppose I made this as the x-axis and this as the y-axis, then in the green x and y-axis, these 2 points are same. So the Rolle theorem will be applicable on the green x and y-axis. So you're basically doing rotation of axis. Now, obviously, rotation of axis is something too complicated for us. It is hardcore coordinate geometry. I don't know if you have done it in your +2 or not. I've done it in my +2 and I've not used it since. So I don't think it's important to do all the coordinate geometry. I'm just telling you that this is what's happening right now, because maybe they ask it in an interview that what's happening here. Okay, so maybe they ask you to prove this in the interview also, and then they ask you what is effectively happening. So what's essentially happening is that you are rotating your axes so that the function starts obeying this particular property. Okay. Now, one very interesting application of Rollet theorem is on highway tolls. So suppose you have two tolls on, let's say, Yamuna Expressway. One starts at Greater Noida, and the other starts at the other is at J1. Okay, so those are your two tolls, the first two tolls. The distance between the two tolls is, let's say, 50 kilometers. Now, the permitted speed is 100 kilometer per hour. Now, somebody notices that you crossed the Greater Noida toll at 2:05. Okay, at 2:05 p.m. you crossed Greater Noida and you reached Jewar at 2:30. So you have completed this entire journey in 25 minutes. So your average speed is 50 by 25 by 60. That is how many hours you have covered up. So that is 120 kilometer per hour. So even though you have not been captured by any speed camera going at 120 exactly, but using mean value theorem, I know that because your average speed was 120, at least at some point you should have been traveling at 120. Okay, so you can be penalized. So this is something which used to be used in on highway tolls before cameras became so cheap. Okay, so now speed cameras are dirt cheap. So and the fines are too high. Okay, so a speed camera costs you 2,000, you get one guy that pays for that camera completely. So now the economics have changed, but initially you did not have these speed cameras. So what they used to do is they used to monitor the punch in time and the punch out time of the cars and figure out, okay, so what is the average speed? And if you are found to have traveled with an average speed greater than the permissible limit, then definitely you, at least at some point, you have traveled over the permissible limit and then you would be fined. Okay, so that's a very interesting application. It's no longer relevant for our world of speed cameras, but yeah, so that's your mean value theorem. All right, so that wraps up mean value theorem. So yeah, you'll see a lot of problems from mean value theorem in past years. Yeah, I have not added the past years. Okay, you see past years after integration. After integration, you will see past years of differentiation as well as integration together. Basically, all the remaining real analysis past years will be there. Right, now the final thing is L'Hopital's rule, the last application of this thing. So L'Hopital rule is very straightforward. So L'Hopital rule says that suppose you have function f and g, which are differentiable on some bounded interval a to b, such that the differentiation of the denominator function is not 0 at any point in a to b. So we are considering two functions on open interval a and b. One is the numerator function f, the other is denominator function g, and g prime should not be equals to 0. G can be 0, but g prime is non-zero. But obviously g also would not be 0 anyway. that thing apart, we say that if both f and g are tending to 0 at some point a plus, then f prime by g prime becoming equal to L implies that f by g equals to L. So suppose I have to find f by g, basically. Okay, so I have to find f by g ka limit at some point a plus, and I do not know what f by g is. If it is of the 0 by 0 format, I cannot conclusively say what the limit is going to be. Okay, so remember, I told you that two kinds of formats are difficult to handle in limits: 0 by 0 formats and infinity by infinity formats. So suppose you have f by g going to 0 by 0 format, then you can differentiate them f prime by g prime, and let's say this thing is equals to L, then f by g will also be equal to, okay, 0 by 0 cannot be determined. Okay, 0 by 0 cannot be determined. So then we use L'Hopital. So we differentiate the numerator and we differentiate the denominator. So let's look at this example: 1 minus cos x upon x square. So find limit. What is the limit? X tending to 0 plus 1 minus cos x upon x square. Right? So 1 minus cos x at 0 is 1 minus 1, so that is 0. X square is also 0, so this is 0 by 0 format. So when you have 0 by 0 format, you can apply L'Hopital. So then you apply L'Hopital. So you differentiate the numerator and the denominator. So what you get is 1 minus cos x ka differentiation is sin x by, so this is basically limit x tending to 0 plus sin x upon 2x. Then again, if you substitute 0, this is still 0 by 0 format. So that can happen sometimes. What you need to do is again differentiate. Okay, so I again differentiate this. So when I again differentiate this, this becomes sin x ka differentiation is cos x by 2. So limit x tending to 0 plus cos x by 2. Now cos x at 0 is 1. This is true. So this is half. So this thing's limit is half. So this thing's limit must be half. A very simple application of differentiation, L'Hopital. It makes finding limits very, very easy. All right. Now the same rules actually also apply to infinity by infinity format. So if f by g is infinite by infinite format, even in that case, you can have you can use the L'Hopital rule. So if f prime by g prime is L, then f by g is also going to be equal to L. So in 0 by 0 or in infinity by infinity, in both cases, you can apply L'Hopital. So these are the only two cases. So let's look at this example now. X by e to power x as x tends to infinity. So x by e to power x. So x is going to infinity. E to power x is going to infinity. So this is basically your infinity by infinity format. So you can differentiate both the numerator and the denominator. So when I differentiate, I will get 1 by e to power x. 1 by e to power x. And now it is 1 by infinity format. So this becomes 1 by infinity and 1 by infinity is 0. So you do not apply L'Hopital here. Doing L'Hopital here is suicide. Okay, so don't apply L'Hopital unless you have a 0 by 0 or an infinity by infinity format. Okay. Similarly, log x by x, as x tends to infinity, both these terms are going to infinity. So you differentiate. So you get 1 by x by 1, which is basically 1 by x. Now limit x tending to infinity 1 by x is going to be 0. Okay, so that's your limit. All right, so now you have a bunch of problems here. Where are the problems? Yeah, so you have this L'Hopital problem set where all the problems have to be done from using L'Hopital. Okay, so a lot of problems. So you'll need to get creative in problems like this. Maybe take log first and then differentiate. So you'll need to get creative with stuff like this. Okay, so suppose this limit is L, then log of L is something something, and then you differentiate. Sometimes you'll have to do some other trick. So you'll have to think about it. I've given you the application doesn't imply that everything is going to be rosy. Not all questions are going to be very straightforward. So you'll have to work your way through this problem set. Obviously, there are a lot of problems, but it's sufficient if you do the first page. I'm only going to discuss the first 16. That's all for me. If you are able to do that, you're good enough. Anyway, the later on problems are going to be involve a lot of trigonometric equations, so I don't want that. So till 16 is sufficient. Okay. All right. So that wraps up optimization. So you have a lot of homework for this week. So yeah, implicit differentiation and differentiation, I'm guessing you would have already done. Those are going to be easier ones. Curve sketching and L'Hopital are going to be the more difficult ones. All right, given L'Hopital solutions, yes, I have. All right, fine. Yeah. So I've given the L'Hopital solutions. Okay, some of them may be wrong. So look out for the wrong ones. Okay, so that's it for today. So let's end here and we'll meet again tomorrow with microeconomics, and we are going to start a new topic. Do attempt the test on producer theory before that. If you have any doubts, we'll discuss it. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. Welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.